Hello, I'm John Gantz. Welcome to HVA-Chicks radio show. We have a great show ahead of you today, and got a great guest. Gonna bring the guest on any minute now. Welcome, Louise.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here tonight.
Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. So this is, I think, episode 6 of this new podcast?
It is.
All right. Getting in on the ground floor. I like it. I like it a lot.
So what are we talking about tonight? I'll let you get into it.
Oh yeah, let's just jump right into it. So I got to tell you, so I looked at the promo for this show, right? And I feel like there's just one thing. Let's just go ahead. We're going to knock it out of the park, and we're going to talk about why there is a segment on there about drinking with chickens. So in case you all didn't know, there is actually a national recognized holiday. If you go to your national calendar day.com or whatever it is, they will recognize National Drink with Chickens. And I like to have a lot of fun. So I don't own any chickens personally. But I do own a purse that has a chicken, and I do have a very lovely coffee mug that has a chicken on it. So I like to celebrate, and every year for the past couple of years, I go somewhere and I take pictures of fake chickens drinking. So that's the story behind that. I do like to have a lot of fun in my life and everything that I try to do. But I also have to balance that with some serious topics, because the real reason that I wanted to get on the show and have a conversation was really to talk a lot about the dangers of CO and talk a little bit about combustion analysis. And I think we're going to try to have another guest join us to tell some stories. Apparently, technical difficulty. We can't quite do the call in, which is a little bit of a bummer. I've been practicing my best Frasier voice. We're listening. But we're going to try to improvise, so bear with us. But if you do have some stories, you can always put them in the comments, or you can reach out, because I do enjoy, and by enjoy, I appreciate hearing the stories about the dangers of carbon monoxide and how it's really affected those in our industry, because I think it's something a lot of people are aware of, but they don't realize maybe all of the sources of where carbon monoxide can come through. So I like to remind people, because I know, at least here in Indiana, that's where I'm based out of, is summer finally arrived, and people don't think about all of the external sources of carbon monoxide. And John, you're way south, right? You're in
I'm in Florida.
Okay. So you probably don't talk about carbon monoxide nearly as much in Florida as you might.
Not too much.
No. But, it's a good time, especially this time of year. So this is your little PSA. So a lot of carbon monoxide poisonings actually do still happen during the summertime. One big source is generators. So if the power goes out, people don't like being hot and muggy down there. So they'll throw a generator on their house. If those aren't properly vented, it can cause you a major issue with it coming back into the house. Sometimes people decide to do things like put them in their garages because maybe it's a little rainy outside, and you wind up with a lot of carbon monoxide building up into the workspace. The other place, though, that carbon monoxide poisoning has actually happened a lot of times in the summer is on boats. People don't think about boat exhaust. Boat exhaust is just as bad as auto exhaust. And then we have appliances that are year-round, right? So you think about it, ovens, ranges, stovetops, you have water heaters, all of those things produce carbon monoxide. And so that's really kind of changed a little bit of the industry and the conversation that we want to have with people, because with those fuel-fired appliances that are running year-round, combustion testing has become even more and more important for us. Are you there, John? Oh. So that's part of the reason I wanted to talk about it, is because so many people just don't realize all of the external...
Very right now. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you just kind of came back for me a little bit. So it seems like even the best laid plans, right? Like with our internets, like something has to go awry. It's not really a true podcast if everything goes exactly as scheduled, right?
Oh, never.
Never. And it's also the joy, right? We can just say, hey, this is also learning curves on episode 6. So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going to try to plug through this. I know it's a little...
No, never.
So we could talk a little bit.
We want to start.
Oh, I think we've started with a lot. And I was like, crap, we're only 7 minutes into this. Like, we got to fill in a lot of time for us. That's okay. So maybe we should do a little history. I know we kind of just jumped a little bit into why I drink with chickens and some of the major sources of CO during the summer. But I think it would probably be good. Maybe I'll give you guys a little bit of an introduction about me and where I came from in the industry and how I really got into talking about the dangers of CO, because it's not your typical journey. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Louise Kellar. I'm the National Training Manager for UEI Test Instruments. I've been with UEI just a little shy of 10 years. I'm at like 9 years and 11 months today, actually. But my background wasn't anything in this. My background was actually retail management, and optical, long before I ever came to UEI. An opportunity presented itself for me to join the UEI family in Indianapolis, which is where I'm based out of. And it has been an amazing journey over the last 10 years of learning and trying to figure out where exactly I fit in with all of this. And it turns out one of the first things that I really started teaching about was the dangers of CO and how to do combustion analysis. We've been making combustion analyzers for almost as long as I've been alive. And it's actually pretty darn close. They started making the very first combustion analyzer that they debuted the same year I was born. So that was always kind of a little bit of a fun fact for me. And it's really a specialty and a sweet spot that we have in the market. And it turns out that I was aware of what carbon monoxide was. I had always heard things like, oh, you should have a carbon monoxide detector in your house. And I always have. It was just something that's always been there. But I didn't really know all of the dangers of it. So I really did a deep dive, not only into carbon monoxide, but how to do combustion analysis. And I started teaching some classes on it probably about 5 years ago. And that presentation has definitely morphed. I don't know how I have such a serious topic that I am so absolutely passionate about based on the intros and, if you get to have a side conversation with me. But it turns out that there are just a lot of misconceptions about carbon monoxide and a lot of things that maybe I've taken for granted during my time and just my time on Earth. And so I want to be able to share that message with those people that are out there who are anybody who's going to listen. I can talk to you about carbon monoxide for probably hours on end and tell you some of the most heart-wrenching stories that you could ever possibly imagine. And I think those stories are also what help to keep me fueled to want to keep talking about it, because carbon monoxide it's completely avoidable in getting carbon monoxide poisoning. If you know and you're testing and you're looking for it and you have the correct monitors and you're doing your job properly, there's a lot of ways to mitigate that. And one of the biggest things that I've learned, though, over my time, and John, you probably can attest to this if you've ever opened up a installation manual for maybe a furnace. Like,
Yes.
every page has multiple warning signs on it that tell you multiple, like every single page. If this isn't vented properly, if this isn't done properly, you could cause carbon monoxide injury or death.
Yeah.
And the death part, that's obviously, that's really scary. We don't want to have any of our customers dying. The thing that I learned, though, really digging deep, is that injury portion of carbon monoxide. So you read a newspaper article, you listen to a news story, and they tell you somebody was exposed to a high level of carbon monoxide. They were exited out of the building and they're, recovering just fine. Those are the easy stories, honestly. Those are the stories where there was a carbon monoxide spike. They recognized it early enough. They were being able to be evacuated to safety. The part that I found a lot of people don't realize with carbon monoxide, though, is that carbon monoxide can build up. So even in lower levels of exposure, it can cause long-term injury. And those are the things that I don't think that we talk about enough, is that long-term injury. So we've, at UEI Test Instruments, we have partnered with an organization called the National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Association, the NCOAA. And the NCOAA was actually founded by a lady who had long-term carbon monoxide exposure. And it starts off with your kind of typical symptoms, like, you might have some headaches, fatigue, nauseousness. It can mimic flu-like symptoms, those type of things, when you've been exposed to low levels for a while. But a while, it gets progressively worse, and it's often misdiagnosed because those symptoms can present so many different ways. One of the ways, though, long-term exposure, they're finding out that people are getting diagnosed with things like traumatic brain injury, early onset Alzheimer's. They'll start losing mobility, and it's all at levels that are lower than what your carbon monoxide alarm at your house will actually detect.
That's interesting.
And those are the stories. Yeah, those are the stories, though, that just, they all break my heart. I never want to hear somebody was needlessly exposed to carbon monoxide. But when you find out that somebody was suffering for 13 years, there was a story about a lady that was just outside of Indianapolis who thought she had the flu for 10 years. It turns out she actually had an improperly vented water heater that nobody knew. And she had a carbon monoxide detector in her house. Now, there was never any conclusive, but the working theory is that it never hit high enough levels sustained. Because
to register on the detector.
Yeah, so, and it's really interesting, though, home excuse me, like home carbon monoxide detectors, most of them are written to a UL 2034 standard. And UL 2034 standard says things like a home CO detector must not alarm until it has seen 70 parts per million, sustained for 1 to 4 hours. So if you had a small carbon monoxide leakage coming out of a furnace or a water heater, maybe something that's not continuously pushing carbon monoxide through the flue, you're going to wind up in those lower levels. It's a smaller leak. But that smaller leak, they're finding out that even at those lower levels of exposure continuously will cause those injuries. So I see that we have a question that came up. We know that CO is best to read 0. Yes, we all would love it to be 0. But what are acceptable readings? Unfortunately, it's a little bit over the boards depending on who you ask. So the World Health Organization says in ambient air up to 4 parts per million. ASHRAE says a residential facility can have up to 9 parts per million in it. First responders generally put their cutoff limit, and when they start evacuating out a building is 35 parts per million. But home CO alarms will not alarm until they've seen 70 parts per million for 1 to 4 hours. Now, when you start getting to those higher concentrations, home CO alarms will go off much quicker. So like when you get up to, I believe, about 400 parts per million, it's like 4 to 15 minutes is the alarm response time. And that's why home CO alarms, by the way, home CO alarms are important. Like I even with all of those things that I just said, a home CO alarm will save lives. A home CO alarm won't necessarily protect you, though, from those lower levels of injury. So that's why it's always a good idea to have something that will detect when you walk into a facility. Because truthfully, I mean, I want to protect homeowners. We want to protect business owners. We want to protect the general public. The thing about it is that if you don't have something that's going to monitor those lower levels, you're never going to know. Because as the reminder to everybody out there, carbon monoxide, it is tasteless, it is odorless, and it is colorless. So if you aren't testing, everybody in the industry will tell you you're just guessing. And we want to protect everybody that's involved in that. And there's ways to do that because so we talked about some of the low level monitors that are there. We've talked about having, making sure we have a CO alarm. Also having a properly tuned combustion analyzer when you walk into an environment is also very important because that will also work as an ambient air detector for you. But one of the interesting studies, though, that I saw, it was a study, I think, last year or the year before by, I can't remember who did it now, but I think it was one of the UL studies that they did, that they actually said that homeowners, about 60% of homeowners think the HVAC contractor is mostly responsible for mitigating those risks of CO. So the homeowner is putting a lot of stock in the fact that everybody listening here has the right tools in their tool bag and they're monitoring that when they come into a home. Like there's a expectation that it's the contractor's responsibility. And it turns out that if you're not using the right tools, you're doing your customer a disservice in that.
Now, as a homeowner, what could they do to help?
So as a homeowner, so there's a couple of ways. I don't get to reach out necessarily to homeowners, but I really wish homeowners would actually start asking contractors, what are you doing to mitigate the risk? I wish they were as educated about CO detectors and alarms as they are about having a fire alarm in their house. Because I bet if you ask most homeowners, they're going to tell you they have a fire alarm, and that was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
but they're not necessarily going to have a carbon monoxide detector, or they think a carbon monoxide detector is going to work in perpetuity. By the way, those carbon monoxide alarms in houses, they have an end date. Depending on the manufacturer, it can be anywhere from 5 to 10 years, and they still need batteries. And I think as a homeowner, education is your biggest friend. If you have a contractor that's coming into your house, I would highly recommend asking them, having the homeowner ask them, what are you doing? Did you detect any carbon monoxide in my house? Because again, a homeowner may not know that they have carbon monoxide, and there's so many sources within the home that you can have carbon monoxide. As I mentioned kind of at the beginning of this, you could have, it could be coming from an oven, it could be coming from a water heater, it could be coming from a dryer. And you don't know. So unfortunately, there's not a great deal other than education. And if you're a contractor, if you educate your customer today, they're most likely going to remember that tomorrow. And if they move to a different area, they may start asking the contractor those hard questions of, well, what did you do? Did you detect anything? Was there a special test that you did?
So what's some of the... Oh, we got a question from Danny. What are the differences between CO monitors, CO detectors, and combustion analyzers?
So the first two, right? So when we're talking about monitors and detectors and alarms, like sometimes those phrases are even a little bit on the interchangeable. Combustion analyzers, let's just start with what a combustion analyzer is. A combustion analyzer is a tool that is designed to measure the flue gases. So the combustion analyzer is what is going to be measuring the gases that are getting expelled into the flue and ultimately outside in the ambient air. And there's a lot of things you can tell about if a system is running properly based on that flue gas analysis. Combustion analyzer can also help you and lead you into if you might possibly have a cracked heat exchanger, because you can look at things like before and after the blower kick on, if there's changes in the oxygen, if there's changes in the CO levels, and if there's changes in the excess air levels. And that can help you determine, hey, you know what? I need to do more investigation. There's definitely an issue running with this, because cracked heat exchangers, they account for a little less than 10% of the reason home CO detectors go off. So like a home CO alarm, that's what you're going to find that should be mounted in your house somewhere. And depending on how big your house is, how many appliances you have, you should probably have a multitude of those based on that. And then there's CO monitors, which are really going to be checking all of those levels of CO in the ambient air. So instead of it's going to show you those lower levels, there are CO alarms out there, but CO detectors are going to be, they're going to show you an actual value on them. So hopefully that helped.
Yeah. So what are some of the CO situations that you have heard of that could have been prevented by better testing?
Oh, there are lots of them. So a couple of them though, I'll tell you that very first, the story of the lady who founded the NCOAA. She had multiple problems in her house. She had a water heater that wasn't drafting properly, and she had furnaces that weren't being drafted properly. And one might want to just chalk that up to no contractor. Maybe she was the terrible homeowner that never ever had her, furnaces tested and checked. Well, here's the thing. She did. She was actually very faithful in that. She had contractors. She did the preventative maintenance spring and fall. So for her AC and her heating. And not one contractor had come in with a combustion analyzer or an ambient air CO detector. 13 years. 13 years, I think it was. The lady in Indianapolis who had a water heater that wasn't drafting properly. Also, preventative maintenance. Nobody caught that there was CO running into the house. I run into situations when I get to travel the country because, again, you never know where you're going to find CO. But here's a side place that I found CO, and it was going into an unnamed wholesaler. They were running propane forklifts, and it was cold, and they didn't open the doors, and all that carbon monoxide was just building and building and building up in the warehouse. In fact, I was getting ready to do a combustion class there. I took my analyzer outside, fired it up like you're supposed to do, right? We always want to start those things outside in the ambient air. I started it up and went inside. And by the time I got to the warehouse, we were peaking, I think, close to 50 parts per million.
Wow.
And I was talking to the forklift drivers. I was like, do you guys find that you're getting a lot of headaches? And everybody wants to just kind of brush that off and make the joke, yeah, who doesn't get a headache at work? And I'm like, no, is this like this every day? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, you realize, and they're like, yeah, we go home and we feel fine. And it was their body purging that CO.
Because they were getting the fresh air afterwards.
Because they were getting out of that environment, but you can't purge it instantaneously. Like, it builds up over time. And it can take a very long time for your body to purge that, especially if you're consistently getting exposed to it. The two ladies that I mentioned stories about, I don't know if they are all 100% over all of the side effects that they had from that accidental carbon monoxide poisoning, because it was years and years of exposure. I've heard stories. I will tell you, as happy of a person as I like to be, I was bawling last year at the NCOAA conference listening to one of the dads. Actually, there were several dads who had told stories about losing their children to carbon monoxide. One of the guys lost his son. His son loved to travel. We were about the same age. The son and his girlfriend had decided to go down to Mexico to take vacation. They went out and did all of the things that you would expect, to do on a nice, holiday. They were staying at a really nice hotel, and they started to feel ill. They chalked it up to food poisoning. Maybe we had too much of a good time, and they weren't getting better. They were not getting better during the whole time that they were there, to the fact that they wound up actually going to a med check. And it turns out that they were at the med check for a while. They wound up feeling a lot better. They had gotten pumped with fluids, all of those type of things. Went back to their hotel, and they never got to leave that hotel.
Wow.
Yeah, and it turns out that was it was a faulty boiler in the hotel. And instead of having the boiler fixed, the hotel had just removed the CO detectors that kept going off. And that's not an uncommon story. And you can look up the news. Just type in your state and type in CO poisoning, and I would guarantee that there will probably be 10 to 15 stories that will pop up for every single state. And it's heartbreaking, because it was preventable. Had somebody have just gone in and done the due diligence, and if people would have just had their equipment with their preventative maintenance, that's one step, right? Is making sure that they do the preventative maintenance. But there's a lot of stories of contractors who have gone maybe to a basement and they start feeling ill. And that's a story that we hear, unfortunately, more often than I would like to talk about. That they will wind up falling ill, and the headaches, and when it's at higher levels, they will like start feeling that drowsiness. And when you start getting that drowsiness, you don't have that mental clarity that you should have. And I think there's a lot of stories. I will tell you, every time that I have taught my CO class, I think at least one person has come up to me to tell me about some sort of personal experience that they have had with CO.
Yeah. We are going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Mm-hmm.
207customs.com is your hub for all your HVA-Chicks merch needs. If you guys are looking for a hat, a shirt with the HVA-Chicks logo, a tumbler, HVA-Chicks radio show, you name it, it's on 207customs.com. Use code HVAC10 at checkout. If you're looking for quality, high-performance HVAC installation and service, reach out to Abraham Heating and Air. You can go to their website at abrahamheatingandair.com and book an appointment online. They are one of the best companies out there. They fully support HVA-Chicks Coalition and the HVA-Chicks radio show, and they are truly the place where quality meets comfort.
Welcome back.
Yeah. I was just taking a peek in the chat that I wasn't able to keep up with because I just don't stop talking. And you know what? Same thing's happening in that chat that I just said happens after my classes, right? Is that people are starting to share their stories. And, you know, I appreciate everyone that is sharing a story out there. I know there are some doozies of a story. Make sure those stories, though, tell your coworkers, tell anybody you work with, make sure that they understand what you've seen, because sometimes, you know, I can be up here and I get to reach a large amount of people at any one time, but that doesn't mean that everybody is listening to everything that Louise always has to say, right? But if you can add that personal story to it, it definitely makes a difference and makes people rethink it. And really just understand the importance of it. And that's why I wanted to stress that colorless, tasteless, odorless, it can happen in the summertime. You know what else I've seen? People barbecuing in their garage. Don't barbecue in your garage, people. Like, there is a whole outdoor space for that. Yeah. There are a lot of stories like that. Don't barbecue in your garage. Don't run the generator too close to your house. Make sure it's outdoors. Be cognizant if you're out on the lakes this time of year. Boats put out a lot of carbon monoxide. So if there's a bunch of boats that are all docked together, or they like to form their circles, if they're all back to back, all that carbon monoxide can get back up on the into the air, and it's going to create so much that it can overwhelm people. There's a lot of stories or kids hanging off the back of boats while they're still running. That's another one of the sad stories I've heard. And then again, anything that's fuel fired. So your ovens, stoves, dryers, water heaters, all of those things produce carbon monoxide year round.
So if there's one thing or multiple things you would want a HVAC tech to know about CO and combustion analysis, what would it be?
Do it. That's the number one thing. No, and I mean that seriously. Like, you don't. I have literally had contractors tell me, well, I haven't killed anybody yet, so why do I need this?
To save people.
I know, but that's literally, like, I want you guys to understand that, like, those are literally things that I haven't killed anybody yet, so it's fine. But, and do you know if you left them with long-term injury? Do you, like, this is the part where I'm going to get really passionate. Right, I see somebody in the to not kill people. Yes, don't kill your customers, all right? I've said this a multitude of times. It's terrible for business. The other thing, though, we want to make sure that the customer doesn't have that long-term injury or illness. It's that you may not know that you left your customer exposed if you're not testing. And I think it's very important to have an ambient air CO detector when you walk into a building or house. I think it's very important to do combustion analysis because there are just so many things that you can learn. If a gas is tasteless, colorless, and odorless, and it can kill you, why the heck do you not want to protect yourself from that?
Yeah. Now, can you go through the process on a proper combustion analysis for us?
Sure. So, there's a lot of different, it depends on what you are actually testing. So, first thing, right, to be able to do a combustion analysis, you need to have your combustion analyzer. All right. So, if you don't have one, go buy a UEI test instruments, combustion analyzer. We have a variety of options for you. You can reach out to us later about what all your options are. But you want to have a combustion analyzer. You want to make sure that you are outside in the ambient air when you start it up. You want to make sure that you're not doing it over any running tailpipes or anything like that. And you want to let it go through its purge because that purge is equally as important. Because your analyzer is not only if there happen to be any residual like gases left on your sensors, that's the time that it is going to purge off all of those residual gases. Your analyzer is also taking a baseline of that ambient air. So if you're in an area that is very saturated with CO, you're not going to get an accurate flue gas reading because your sensor is already being overwhelmed with CO. So we want to make sure that we're doing it outside in the ambient air. Once you get into the building and you've identified what you're testing, and that's why I say it depends on specifically what you're testing. But for your standard combustion test, you're going to have a test port. So you'll have a test port installed into the flue. You're going to put your flue probe in there. You're going to also verify that you have the right fuel setting because like natural gas, propane, heating fuel, those all have different burning qualities, right? So the way that the analyzer is going to spit out the results can vary depending on the gas because their properties are a little bit different. Once the units run up to steady state, and so you're going to see that your temperature, your CO, your oxygen levels, those are all going to steady off, and that is your actual combustion test. It's not hard to do a combustion test. Like doing the test itself is pretty straightforward. It's once you have your results, what are they really telling you? So, for example, and by the way, we always speak in general terms of rules of thumb because every manufacturer of equipment can be different and it depends on the type of equipment that you are working on. So there's like an industry standard on CO. And when I'm talking about CO in this context, I'm talking about CO in the form of the flue gas. So it should be vented out pretty easily and it should dissipate pretty quickly for you. The general rule of thumb is if you see less than 100 parts per million, you're good to go. Now, high efficiency, those condensing ones, you're generally going to see like 50 parts per million and less. And those are just kind of general rules of thumb. If you were to ask like AHRI, the guidelines are a little bit different. So I think they'll allow you to have up to 200 parts per million in the flue before they say that you have to red tag something. And it might be 400. I have a lot of specs going on right now. But so they have a different set. but the industry standard is. But then again, if you were to look at a boiler, a lot of boiler manufacturers actually set up their commissioning and everything is based on the CO2 and the O2 numbers. And they'll say things like you can have up to 150 parts per million in the flue, and that's fine. So you have to know the equipment that you're working on, the size of the equipment, and always follow whatever the manufacturer specs are on that.
Okay. Oh, we have another question. What are
Yep.
some symptoms of CO poisoning that our techs should be aware of while working on equipment? And what would be the most important thing that we should educate the customer on?
All right. So, symptoms of CO poisoning that techs should be aware of. If you walk into an environment and you start feeling like you suddenly get an onset of a headache, maybe you get lightheaded, nauseousness, dizziness, those are probably the most common symptoms. If you start feeling really drowsy, especially if it's in the higher level, those are all symptoms that you're getting exposed at a higher concentration right then and there. If you're talking to your customer and maybe a customer has expressed that they haven't been feeling well for quite some time. And again, those are things that can present like all of the symptoms I just mentioned, but it can also present to like flu-like symptoms. Or maybe they got like just some sort of weird, and by weird diagnosis, an unexpected diagnosis of something that has to do with motor or cognitive skills. Those can also be symptoms that they've been turned to long-term carbon monoxide. And I think there's a way to have that conversation with your customer, just being like, hey, by the way, I've done you can even do it post you're wrapping up everything, but take an extra 30 seconds, take an extra minute to educate yourself, educate your customer about the dangers of carbon monoxide. It only takes a couple minutes. Like, I know some companies even have leave behind pamphlets that they'll do that'll talk about a few of the warning signs. In fact, there's a hotel chain now that actually has carbon monoxide alarms put in all of their rooms. And on like their little welcome package, when you walk in, it actually tells you about the dangers of carbon monoxide. So they're also helping to educate the general public about that. But I think spending that extra minute, 2 minutes, asking about their carbon monoxide alarm. When was the last time you changed the batteries? How long have you had it installed? And yes, I do realize that, a customer might tell you I just changed batteries, and it's the same customer that just told you they changed their filters.
Oh, they never do
And
that.
yeah. Right. So, but you've left them the information and you've educated them about it. If you happen to be, maybe you've installed that carbon monoxide alarm for them, have them pull out their phone, have them put like in 1 year that they need to check this piece of equipment, right? They need to check their CO alarm. I go by I usually check it every time we have a time change. So, I'm going to be checking them twice a year to make sure. And that's an easy date. But we all use calendars that work in perpetuity on our phones, right? So if I put something and tell it to repeat every year, whether I have this phone or I've, switched to 5 different phones, it's going to remind me no matter what, hey, go ahead and check your carbon monoxide alarm and make sure. And the other thing is just, making sure, like I recommend, as I said, I understand carbon monoxide alarms, they're going to save a life. So just start having that conversation with them. And the more that all of us have that conversation with the homeowner, I think the better off we're all going to be. Yep.
Josh, that's a good question. Where should homeowners place detectors or monitors?
According to the manufacturer recommendation.
Let's see. So I've seen test ports where technicians put metal tape on them or those little plugs.
Mhm.
What is actually recommended? Because I've seen metal tape fall off.
Yeah, I don't recommend using metal tape because you are correct. It can fall off. So there's a couple of different things that you can do. One of them is there are the test plugs. They're easy, right? Because they just fit into where that test port has been. Easy peasy. It makes it easy. Next year, you can pop those out and the test port's still there. There are, depending if you are working on like high efficiencies. So some of that PVV and PVC, there are some manufacturers of that actually have pieces that have test ports built into them. So you can actually, like when you're putting in that flue, you can actually have a test port installed, and it's a little screw off cap. And so once you're done, you just screw that cap back on, and it makes it easier. If
Okay.
you're
I've
working
seen that a
on
few
some of it,
times.
you can also use like you can use high temperature like silicone to seal up those holes as well.
Okay. Does UEI recommend any certifications for any of the CO or combustion analysis?
Yes. Yes, and that is actually a great question. Almost every manufacturer of combustion analyzers recommends that you have a yearly recertification. That's just across the boards because there are sensors, and there are sensors that are testing, such as CO, which is a very toxic gas. So sensors can naturally drift. So we all recommend that you get your analyzer recertified every single year. And what's really neat about the company that I am fortunate enough to work for, we have a what we call UEI Service Plus Guaranteed on our combustion analyzer. Because when you're looking at your analyzers, I want to tell you there are two costs to it. There's what do I pay for it today, and what am I going to pay to upkeep it, right? So just like your car, that you bought a car, it has this and that, but you still got to get your oil changed in the car, right? If you have a non-electric vehicle, you still got to get your oil changed. So we came out with a program called UEI Service Plus Guaranteed. It's a easy to use program. It's designed for the contractor. It won a dealer design award in 2024, but every year you send in your combustion analyzer, we give you another year warranty on it for up to 10 years from the date of service. We offer same day recertification. So if it lands in our Indianapolis facility on, say, Wednesday morning, it goes back out on Wednesday afternoon. So if most customers are within 2 days, maybe 3 days shipping at most for us. And then the very final thing is that you actually get your included in everything shipping to and from us. So it's very upfront and transparent. On our website, you can go look, find out what your analyzer is going to cost before you ever send it in, which is really nice because there is nothing worse. And you understand it as well, because there is nothing worse than surprise charges. So we are very upfront and transparent with our pricing for our customers because we want to make it easier. I see in the comments somebody saying they send off their analyzers every July for certifications. I say thank you for that. We really appreciate getting the spread throughout the year. But we did design the service, and we've been able to uphold that promise. So in the event that you forgot to send it in July and you send it in when it finally gets cold, we will still honor that guarantee with same day turnaround if you're eligible for our program.
So what features make UEI's combustion analyzers stand out compared to others in the industry?
So that was actually one of the absolute biggest things, is the service. We've been doing this for a really long time. as I said, we've been doing it as long as I've been alive. Combustion analyzers are something that we are incredibly passionate about. That UEI Service Plus guaranteed, there's nobody else out there that has been able to touch that program in a manner that we were able to do. We also try to make our analyzers very intuitive, very easy to use, and we've created them in such a way that no matter if you are working on a residential analyzer or you were moving up to one of my more commercial analyzers, their operations in how they work are going to be pretty much the same. You get some more bells and whistles, obviously, as you progress up that line, but you don't have to go relearn everything. So if you started out with a basic combustion analyzer, and then you know what, maybe you've moved on, the company, maybe you've even gone from like residential to doing more commercial work, you don't have to relearn the whole process of using a combustion analyzer, because what it's going to do is it's just been able to add more features for you.
Okay. Are there any recent innovations UEI has made specifically to address technician feedback?
So we have made changes across our line based on technician feedback. So by the way, we love having technician feedback. I think it's a very important thing, right? Because Louise can say, hey, I really think we need this, but if I don't have any techs who agree with me, it's probably not going to go anywhere. So, you know, earlier this year, we heard that there were a lot of techs who were tired of having to have really long hoses for their manometers to do static pressure. So we came out with 2 individual static pressure probes that made it so much easier. And we heard that people wanted to be able to have a screen and also be able to run it to an app. So those were some of the things that we did. We created a product called the SPM kit designed to meet that exact need. And I think you'll see if you looked at the evolution of our line, it's come from the feedback that we've received from our customers. And
Okay.
you never know what might be coming down the pike.
Perfect. Look forward to seeing more UEI products.
Yeah, absolutely.
I believe we'll be taking a commercial break. Yeah, we're going to play them at the end.
It's been a lot.
Danny's
I can't believe I just.
Danny's
looked at the
messing with me
topics.
right now.
Oh no. So for those of you that don't know, Danny is working hard behind the scenes trying to keep John and I going. And this is my first time being on this show. And John, have you been on one of the other episodes yet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stumbling a little worse than this one, but doing better
Well,
this one.
you know.
So how can contractors better educate their homeowners, do you think? I know we touched a little bit on it, but
yeah, we talked a little bit about it. So I think there are a couple of things. So I think there's key talking points that you should just have in every single house. So when we talk about it, and it's really interesting because I know a lot of contractors have things like checklist, right? You have a checklist. If you're going to, you know, do a preventative maintenance on a furnace or an air conditioner, right? You have a step-by-step list of things that you are going to check, or you have to be responsible that you talked about. What I don't see on a lot of those lists is, did you educate the homeowner about the dangers of CO? Did you educate and I think that's something that if we just started putting those more into our conversations and pick a couple of metrics, right? Because homeowners, they love seeing data. And they might not understand it, but if you show them something and you can educate them on a couple of the key metrics of why something's really important, that's not only going to help educate the homeowner, it's also going to help endear yourself to that homeowner, because maybe you're the first contractor that's ever talked about to them about the dangers of CO. Everybody else is like, oh, you're good to go. The flame was good. And they walked out the door.
Yeah.
And I think the more contractors talk about it and get on board with having those conversations as part of the regular maintenance or installation, whatever it might be, the more the homeowner hears it, the more it's going to resonate with the homeowner.
So we have a question. Where can people contact Louise?
Oh, there are all sorts of fun places you can contact me. I am active on a couple of the social medias. You can find me pretty easily on the Facebooks and on the LinkedIn. Just type in my name. Make sure you spell my last name right, and you'll find me. Or maybe look up a couple of the fine folks that are running the HVAC or the HVA-Chicks coalition. I'm probably friends with them on one of those social medias. The other way that you can contact us, though, and get a hold of me is we have an 800 number at UEI. It's 1-800-547-5740, and they'll be happy to transfer you over to me. And by the way, it's a real person that answers the phone. Like, we don't have an automated system that's going to tell you press 1 for this. Your menu options have recently changed. Please listen to the ad. You will most likely get a real person for about 12 hours a day that will be happy to contact us. Or you can go to our website, ueitest.com. On our website, we have a contact us page, and we also have it looks like a chat bot. But during business hours, that is also manned by a real person. So we're really big on our customer service and making it as easy as possible. And I got to tell you, it is a heck of a lot easier to call up, have somebody answer and say, can I talk to Louise? And they transfer you over than to listen to your menu options have changed.
So, what is one combustion reading that techs commonly overlook or misinterpret?
I don't know if I have enough time left in the show to go over what that actual answer is. So we might have to have a round 2 of this, because I have a feeling after round 1, there's going to be a whole lot more questions. And maybe we'll have the call-in portion up and running to go. The biggest one that I see is not understanding the difference between CO and CO air-free. So a combustion analyzer will have 2 different CO readings on it, and knowing what the manufacturer spec is. So there's CO and CO air-free. One is a diluted sample and one's an undiluted sample. There's a lot of math that goes on in the backwork of your combustion analyzer. But it's basically the CO air-free is taking out the value of what they call excess air, because we have to have more makeup air in that system, right, for it to fire properly. And there's a whole other conversation we can have about that. But your CO air-free is always going to be higher than your CO. And knowing what the manufacturer specs is saying if they're referencing CO or CO air-free.
You mean they don't specify that usually?
Well, it's contractors you don't know. Like, so like if you just looked at something and you were like, why am I getting 2 different CO readings? And they can be drastically different.
Yeah.
Depending on the type of equipment that you're working on. So I would say that's probably one of the most common misread of all of the combustion readings that people get.
Okay. Anything else you would like to share?
That went fast, John. Can I just say, like, I looked down and I was like, how are we already at 10 o'clock Eastern time already? Like, I can't believe I genuinely, by the way, like, I appreciate everybody who has tuned in to listen. I love the HVA-Chicks Coalition. I love everything that is going on out there. If you want more information about combustion analysis, because there's only so much that we can do, definitely reach out, get in contact. I'd love to do a presentation for you. We can discuss how we can do it. There's a variety of options that I have for you. But know that I genuinely really appreciate everything that the coalition does and everybody that is part of it, because I love seeing techs lifting up other techs, and I love seeing trainers freely sharing their information. Like, that is one of the most amazing things. I like the fact that in this environment that gatekeeping really it's non-existent, and that is just a great way to go. So if you got some knowledge that you want to share with somebody, share it with them, because we all get to learn something new.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today, Louise, and
Thank you for having me.
Definitely look forward to having you on again.
Yes, we will definitely do this again.
Thank you, everybody.
Cielo Wi-Fi thermostats are the HVA-Chicks choice for all your mini split and conventional split needs. If you're not sure which Wi-Fi thermostat to choose Cielo. Want to kill 99.9% of contagions in commercial and residential spaces without creating ozone? Check out the Air Shield by Revive Air. Thank you, Revive Air, for supporting the HVA-Chicks radio show.